Hi, my name is Freya and I am lucky enough to be a current artist in residence here at the Australian Tapestry workshop. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are gathered here this evening on the land of the traditional owners, the Yellowkit Weelam clan of the Boonwurrung, and I would like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'm quite honoured to have been selected to be an artist in residence here at the ATW. It's been a very productive but peaceful and reflective period that's allowed me to dream up new work and pass through the summer in a beautiful light-filled space. The primary focus or concepts behind my work consider how the process of art making is fundamentally a precognitive experience that is driven by unconscious thought, emotion, and sensory-based impulses. It's a conceptual exploration of the passage of affect, that is, the subjectively experienced feeling that exists between an artist and art process, observer and the individual in the environment, and how this might be communicated in an interdisciplinary art practice. I don't have a particular method or medium which I work in exclusively. From the slides that you'll see over the next few minutes, this is a work I made in 2015 called Outside Of. It was initially a performance that became a photographic work that was displayed in a light box at Melbourne Central in Knox Lane. I'm not sure how, I might go back and... So I built a set of headphones and a heart monitor that sat over my heart, and I listened to my heartbeat in the middle of Latrobe Street. And this is capturing that image. So I'm really there, sitting on a chair, being the weirdo that everybody stared at. I began early on primarily in dance and performance, so I had an early background in my childhood up until my early 20s in dance, and then later moving into theatre and improvised performance. When I started at art school, I was in jewellery and small object making, which then shifted into larger scale works in my third and fourth years, which employ video, sound, performance, sculpture and installation. This is passing place the threshold of edges. It's the result of a self-directed travelling residency. I was given a grant by RMIT when I graduated to go travelling. So I went to Scotland, a place that I'd spent many years in earlier on, and I'd never returned, but I'd always felt this yearning to be there. It's a place that I feel it has a sense of power, maybe similar or akin to what people feel like perhaps in a church or a sacred space. I felt this amongst the mountains in the highlands and also travelling around the islands. These video works were filmed on the Western Isles as I travelled from the very top at Lewis right down to Barra over a few weeks period. And so these works, they're about, 37 minutes and 18 seconds, alternating loops, and there's also a sound component which I can't play for you now because it's very quiet, but it is basically little ripples of water that shift over shells and sand, and the water is so still you can't really see it, but they're making these slight ripples, and this sound is like a crackling, and it's very, very faint, but it's amazing to just sit still on this beach on maybe 1 or 2 days of the year that the weather is fine. Because this was in the middle of summer and I was wearing my Melbourne winter clothes. So in 2015, during my honours year, I began experimenting with what I call conceptual knitting, creating yarn from the discarded clothing of people that I know, and building large-scale knitting looms out of tree trunks, pieces of palm bark, and these looms borrow a basic design from a French knitting loom or a knitting Nancy, so something that you may have had as a child with 4 pegs that you loop around and it sort of brings out this sort of sausage at the end. I used a similar premise. You can sort of see that these are nails, and just going around and looping, and the weaving or knitting extends out from the end. These works sought to investigate how a device might engender an experience and how that experience might imbue an individual with knowledge and a greater perception of themselves whilst cocooned within an external world. The active looming, a term that I created for this process, whilst observing the passing of time, became a practice, challenging the individual's self-discipline by imposing an experience of endurance, requiring a submission to the unconscious state, and in some ways an obliteration of thought process. As I loomed, I invited visitors to the space to join me and learn the simple technique and carry on with the work. This interactive process allowed work to open up to a wider community of practice and allowed me to share the work beyond a static installation or performative gesture. I came to this idea originally when in consideration of my own meditation practice and the methods that people employ when requiring time outside of time. One particular method that I'm always reminded of when in consideration of these knitted works is a friend who knitted her way through her divorce as a way to cope with the pain and loss of such an experience and to discipline her mind beyond the present. The largest of these conceptual knitting works was exhibited at 7th Gallery in Fitzroy of November last year. This is called Umbilicus and Flux. And this work manifested from an imagined idea of a room loom that would fill the entire gallery space. It is about 12 metres long at this present point. And the idea behind these knitted works is that there is no end point, that they continue. And so I hope to be able to exhibit this again later in the year at Abbotsford Convent. And the work will just continue and it will grow larger. As with all of the knitted works, I don't cast off, they just keep going. So I have a studio at home that's full of looms and big knitted things. So whilst I've been in residence, I've been privileged and lucky enough to be in a lovely space in my mind and also be in a beautiful space. And I've been able to dream up new work. And I know that being present in a creative and industrious environment, it's allowed my mind to expand and absorb upon new ideas. I'm in the process of developing a new video work, which I will exhibit as part of a group show in Sydney later this year. And I have been building bodies, or body parts. These are constructed from fabric and again discarded clothing. This time it's mainly my own clothing. The performative and experiential aspects of my work are quite important for my own understanding of the nature of things I make in relation to my own body and how they might relate to others as well. There's an element of spatial awareness and interaction between myself, but I'm also very curious about how people might interact with the work themselves. I don't always invite people to touch the work, so it's very interesting when they instinctively pick things up and handle them or grab handfuls of fabric. I had a lovely moment watching 2 children lie on the floor in front of the TV screens that I showed you earlier. And they just were watching my work. And the TV screens were actually bigger than they were. And from my vantage point, it just looked like this amazing cinematic experience, but I can only imagine it because the experience belongs to them. So also, while I've been here, Gina and I have, for the duration of our residency, engaged in a series of collaborative drawings. They passed back and forth between our tables, and they became a wonderful aside to the other work that I've been engaging in, as I have a tendency to become quite immersed and uncommunicative as well. I sort of get into it and I'm gone. But we put them on display for you this evening, so they're on my table just behind you, so feel free to have a look. Gina and I have discussed collaborating further on a larger scale and perhaps working towards an exhibition at some point. I would also like to thank the women of the workshop for their voices and participation in my work that you heard earlier. Thank you. And thank you for coming.